Ladies and gents, welcome to CG Reaction. This is Trope Talk. We are not so different, but the channel of Sarcastic production. You know, dear viewer, we are a lot alike, you and I. After all, you clearly like to hear me talk, and I like to hear me talk. We should hang out. Yeah, okay. I love Trope Talk series, man. You know, it talks about different tropes of, different, I guess even it applies to real world, especially movies, games and everything. So it's fun to see certain pattern to things that people use. So we are not so different. This is one of the most used thing that is, especially movies and any storylines like that. You know, always villains uses things like that. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun video. I've took quite a few only Sarcastic production videos already. If you haven't seen them, check out the cast of the playlist calculator for it. Upload lots of videos in 24 hours, so you might have missed some of them. Check that out. Check out the playlist too, like Internet Story, CGV Grey, Real Life Lore, Tier Zoo, cause that in a nutshell. And yeah, let's do this one.
Hey, quick, the hero and the big bad are dueling. The bad guy's winding up to say something devastating. What's he gonna tell our hero? We're not so different, you and I. Exactly. Now, did you cringe as soon as I said that? I know I did, and here's why. It's because whenever that line gets dropped, it's either completely untrue or totally glossed over. In fact, it's so overused and poorly used that it's almost completely lost its impact. The instance that bothers me the most is when the villain is 110% talking out of his ass. Usually this is when the villain's just messing with the hero or trying to get under his skin, which is smart, but annoying because the hero always takes him seriously. No, dude, just because you have a backstory element in common doesn't make you like the guy who murders for fun. Now,
Yeah, I mean, seriously though, we are not so different. That thing is so good if done right, because this shows the bloodline between two things: being a bad guy, being a good guy. I mean, if one guy is doing something horrible things for good, and obviously bad guy is doing horrible things for bad reasons, whatever. But if the end goal is not clear, and if a villain using a different type of psychologist tells the hero that, you know what, you did this, I did this, and in this sense, and we are not so different. You think you are doing good, but overall it's what you think. You're not very different. You are still hurting the people, just like I'm hurting the people. There's no much difference. And then hero feels what he's talking about. Then he has this psychological effect on him. He become all this depressed, sad. And if you do it right, it's so great. But usually what happens is, it's completely wrong. Like, hero doesn't hurt any people, no nothing, but just action could seem similar, and just villains like, we are not so different, and hero just start to get all this fucked up in the head, like, oh, he's talking true, and then gets all sad. And that always frustrated me, like, this is not the same, man. Anybody, a child, can see this. You can't. Only thing this is telling me is that a hero is gullible. Hero is stupid, basically. So if done right, we are not so different. It's such a great thing to use, but usually that's not how it turns out, and it's always annoying.
why is this annoying? Because the hero's being stupid, and that's always annoying. Now, it'd be one thing if the hero actually thought this stuff through and realized he was acting like the villain, but instead you get the hero throwing a tantrum until their friends remind them of the obvious. It's weak. Now, I can see why this gets used, because if you want to throw the hero off balance, comparing them to their nemesis is a good place to start, but in a sense it's empty because it's blatantly not true. Sure, you could have the hero afraid of turning into the villain and reacting because of that, but more often than not, it's played like the thought of having anything in common with the bad guy is breakdown worthy. Not to mention, if you got a bad guy smart and sadistic enough to torment the hero with the prospect of being just like him, wouldn't it make sense for him to draw on the hero's actual weak points? Because this is never played for real trauma. The hero will end up brushing it off as quickly as they accepted it in the first place. Look, it always goes like this. We're not so different, you and I. No! No, you're not. I'm all better now. If the villain wants to mess with the hero, this is the dumbest way to do it, which is why the trope is much less annoying when the villain actually is telling the truth. See, there's a lot that can be done with a hero and a villain that mirror each other. Not only are there foils for each other, but when the villain's calling the hero out like this, it means the villain is introspective, and the hero usually isn't. And that's interesting. Self-aware villains are interesting. And in this case, you got a couple choices. Do you make the hero self-aware too? Let's pull up an example real quick from one of my favorite animes, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Now, pretty early on in the series, spoilers, skip ahead like a minute and a half if you care about those things. So early on in the series, there's this alchemist named Shao Tucker, who does some very shady stuff with human transmutation. The two main characters befriend Tucker's daughter, Nina, and her dog, Alexander. Now, Tucker became a state alchemist when he managed to make a talking chimera, and coincidentally, his estranged wife mysteriously vanished around the same time. Fill in the blanks from there. Now he's in danger of losing his state license and the money that came with it if he doesn't do something equally spectacular. Long story short, Tucker alchemically fuses his daughter with her dog, producing a genuinely horrifying and heart-wrenching creature that can't move without pain but clearly remembers and loves its father in spite of what he's done to it. Now, Ed, the protagonist, completely and understandably flips his shit once he realizes what Shao Tucker has done, but Tucker points out that Ed's not much better. See, in their backstory, Ed and his brother Al previously tried to use alchemy to bring their mother back to life, which predictably went horribly wrong because alchemy's not meant to be used that way, and it cost Ed 2 limbs and Al his whole body. They're both racked with guilt over what they did, and as soon as Tucker plays his not-so-different card, Ed goes ballistic, because, you know, even though what Tucker did is worlds worse, they did both abuse and misuse alchemy for personal reasons, and they both maimed their loved ones in the process. In this case, the villain showed—
Yeah, but context matter. The severity matters too. Just because it's the same lane, same direction, what they did is kind of similar in that sense. You know, context and severity matters here. So, but yeah, that is a great way to blur line and to say we are not so different. I know, you know, the Far Cry 5 story, I don't know if that's the same as this, but you know, we are not so different. Thing works great when the people who are watching a story realize what is what. When, you know, people who are watching the story, they don't know if the good guy is good guy until the end, when they realize, wait a minute, good guy wasn't a good guy, because it's not about what he meant to do, but what his actions actually did. So like in Far Cry 5, the thing is, you know, the protagonist is basically killing people around, cultists and everything, to stop the father, the cult leader. Because he's constantly like, you know, some kind of nuclear bombs and something like that is coming. So he built bunkers and did horrible shit. Alright, so we are going around killing cultists, we are killing lots of people, you know, destroying these bunkers. And then in the end we realize, wait a minute, father was talking the truth. Nuclear bombs do drop. And father and the protagonist goes inside the bunker and gets saved. While we destroyed bunkers, those same bunkers could have been helped lots of people survive. Now one could say the story doesn't, clarifies why bombs fell in a way. So you could say that, you know what, maybe father is the one who launched those bombs somehow, just to prove his point. Yeah, that is true too. But the point is, what father was saying is true. You know, the bombs were coming. What he was doing, kinda, even though his, whatever he was doing was horrible, but he was right that bombs were coming. He was building bunkers, and we were the one who's destroying everything, destroying bunkers and everything. Now more people died since there was no bunkers left, and the bombs fell. So, you know, up until the end, maybe hero's actions were the wrong one, and what we thought was villain, even though the way he did things was villainous, but maybe his end goal was actually better. When you realize that we are not so different, hits really bad. Like, you know, we are not so different. If not just that, but you probably might be even worse because of your actions.
How thin the line is between him and the hero, and it hits the hero hard because it's true. Okay, spoilers done. Basically, when the villain's right, it can mess up the hero for ages, and because the hero's seeing basically what they could be if they went too far, that's super effective. But you know what can be more effective? Having the hero figure that out themselves. Because sure, introspective villains are great, but if you really want to explore your hero, it might do to have them figure something out for a change. So here's an example of that kind of characterization. I've mentioned before in the Q&A how when I was a kid, I watched this show called Reboot. Well, a few months back, I decided to rewatch it to see if it held up, and it mostly did, except for the earlier animation. But I was genuinely surprised at how they characterized the protagonist in Season 3, because they did this thing that I hadn't really seen anywhere else. See, this protagonist had been a kid for the first 2 seasons, and spent the first 3 episodes of Season 3 basically having to step into the role of protector for his entire system, a role that had been previously filled by his childhood hero, who's MIA and presumed dead for most of Season 3. So he's protecting the system against the series' main villain, who is so much bigger and stronger than him, and just doesn't have to care when he tries to fight him. Then the kid ends up getting stuck in a year outside, 10 years inside situation, and grows up in the space between 2 episodes into a full-fledged adult. And he's a jerk now. He's angry and brooding and absurdly strong, and he's nothing like the hero he idolized as a child, the hero he wanted to be. He's become like the villain he had to fight because that villain was powerful and his hero lost. And he recognizes this by himself. He has entire episodes where he argues with himself over whether the sacrifice was worth it. And in the end, he realizes that not only would his hero probably hate him now, his own childhood self would be afraid of him.
But how?
Damn.
You're me.
But you hate me. You must. Look at what you've become.
He's become too much like the monster that made his childhood hell. So he
Why is that the animes and cartoons like this have more deep, psychologically impacting stories than any Hollywood or games that we watch? Because I really miss it. The stories where there is real conundrums and psychological warfare going, and you come to realization in the end. The hero goes through all this journey where he realizes, wait a minute, I was wrong or something like that. There are no stories like that anymore in the games or even in the movies.
works against it. Now, the other interesting thing here is how the villain responds, because during their final showdown, the villain refuses to acknowledge their similarities. He still thinks that this guy is a scared child, no matter how strong he gets. But when it gets right down to the wire and the hero's got him at his mercy, the villain is almost fearful. He clings to the fact that no, he can't do this. It'd go against everything he stood for. He can't have become that much like him because that thought terrifies him. And in the end, the hero agrees, and it's a really good moment. But the bottom line is, a character who up until this point had been okay at best suddenly becomes this intensely interesting and tragic character study, an object lesson about he who fights monsters. But he's not a tragic figure because he pulls himself out of that. And you know what? His whole personal journey would have been way weaker if someone had straight up told him he was turning into the bad guy. Having him realize that himself gave him an unprecedented degree of depth. And that's one of the ways that not invoking this trope can be more powerful than invoking it. Sure, making characters similar is good, making them acknowledge it is good, but an externally prompted revelation isn't necessarily better than an internal one. And I think part of this ties into the hero's journey, weirdly enough. See, in so many stories, the hero just kind of gets dragged along by circumstance. Sure, they might have a motivation or two, but the only things that can make them deviate from those motivations tend to be external. The hero gets pulled from their home, gets pulled into an adventure, gets pulled into their destiny. Even their motivation tends to be pulling them. Why are you doing this? My girlfriend got kidnapped. And if she didn't, well, I'd probably still be a farmer. There's no internal motivation to do anything. It's all external circumstance forcing the character to act. And in a way that feels a little more realistic, but it's not. That's not how people work. People have internal drive to do things. And in stories, that's so often ignored. And with
people's best self comes out whenever they want to do something rather than have to do something. I mean, that is why in the real world, people don't just go to scientists say, solve this. People didn't go to scientists say, make me some kind of a technology that stops cars from swerving in the, highways or something, so there are less accidents. Scientists can't come up with that. But when scientists have ambitions like going to the moon, they can come up with some pretty good ideas like how to stop the glider, that is the shuttle that comes back, how to stop that swerving around. So let's create grooves on the road. Oh, look at that could work on the highways too. So if you directly just tell scientists and engineers that create me something like that, they're not going to do that because they need drive to be creative in a way. And going to the moon is a challenge. That's a drive.
More modern, flawed characters, they're rarely actually expected to want to improve on their flaws. The character's static. They don't work through trauma or repair personality issues, they just are. Character development seems to have largely gone out the window. There's no drive, no reason for them to do anything unless the plot demands it. Having a character figure something out about themselves and work to fix it without external prompting is nearly revolutionary, and therefore might carry more weight. It's easy to throw a plot twist and drop a character into a situation that prompts them to change in one way or another, but having a character change on their own is harder and therefore rarer. And one of the reasons why Not So Different feels so weak is because it's structured like a plot twist, but it's way too predictable. If two characters are similar, you can probably tell. Having one point that out to the other and the other respond with shock feels contrived, even if it's in character for them to not have figured it out. It's a good literary trick being executed in the least effective way possible. It's also worth noting that the Not So Different trope isn't always a villain messing with the hero. Sometimes it's the hero appealing to the villain, or even just two disparate characters realizing their similarities. See, that instance of the trope is used to make two characters closer, because that's how real-world friendships work. And that version's not annoying because it goes somewhere. In its most common instance, this trope is nothing but a waste of time, but in this case, it leads to character growth and relationship development, and therefore can actually be useful. But the villain to hero version doesn't go anywhere in most cases. It's just there for momentary shock value, and it doesn't even shock the audience. So in its most common instance, this trope is nothing but a waste of time. It can be done right, but it so rarely is. So yeah.
Wait a minute. The new video started. Alright. So yeah, that we're not so different thing. If done right, that's a great thing. But that's the thing. Nowadays, nobody puts that much effort into the storyline. I mean, I'm not talking about cartoons, anime. Apparently, just more I react to this channel, I realize that anime and cartoons are more deeper stories than movies and big TV show nowadays. But yeah. That's the thing with the modern stories and everything, that nobody's writing some detailed psychological warfare type of story where a person realizes something, they go through some kind of a change. No, it's just simple. Yeah, we are not so different. I take that back and then realize, oh wait a minute, we are not similar, and then fights back, and all of us like, yeah, we know you're not similar. You were the only stupid one who thought you were. So you are gullible and stupid and supposed to be a hero. That's just weird. So yeah. Alright people, that was We Are Not So Different Trope Talk. If you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. Check out the reaction I did this in the season. Check out the cast for the plays like always Sarcastic, Proxy, Internet Story, and CGB Grey, Tears to Real Life Lore. And yeah, I guess I'll see you next time.